why German soldiers were shocked by American troops in Normandy D-Day. In the first shock for years, many German commanders believed American soldiers lacked the toughness needed for Europe's brutal battlefields. They called them inexperienced, overconfident, too dependent on machines. Some even dismissed them as soldiers of luxury. But in the summer of 1944, everything changed. On the beaches of Normandy, German veterans who had fought across Poland, France, North Africa, and the Soviet Union suddenly faced an enemy unlike any they had expected. Thousands of American soldiers kept advancing through machine gun fire that should have stopped them. When artillery failed, when tanks burned, when officers fell, the attack continued. German reports began describing something they had never expected: an enemy with endless firepower, relentless determination, and an industrial machine capable of replacing every loss. This is the story of how the Normandy Campaign shattered German assumptions about the United States Army forever. By June 1944, Adolf Hitler's empire stretched across much of Europe. Yet cracks were beginning to appear. The Soviet Union was pushing relentlessly from the east. British bombers attacked German cities almost every night. American factories produced tanks, aircraft, trucks, rifles, and ammunition at numbers Germany could no longer match. Still, many German officers believed one thing: if the Allies invaded France, they could be defeated. The Atlantic Wall stretched for nearly 2,000 miles. Concrete bunkers overlooked beaches. Machine gun nests covered every approach. Artillery batteries waited behind thick steel and reinforced concrete. Millions of mines lined the coastline. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel believed the invasion had to be destroyed at the beaches before Allied numbers became overwhelming. His troops prepared every day. Obstacles filled the sand, wooden stakes, steel hedgehogs, anti-tank barriers. Everything was designed to stop landing craft before soldiers even reached shore. German defenders felt ready, but they were preparing for the wrong kind of battle. Across the English Channel, one of history's largest invasion fleets gathered in silence. More than 5,000 ships, thousands of landing craft, hundreds of escort vessels. Above them, nearly 12,000 Allied aircraft waited for dawn. American soldiers packed tightly inside landing craft barely spoke. Many were only 19 or 20 years old. Some had never been under enemy fire. Some had never been under enemy fire. Some had never left home before joining the army. Many quietly checked family photographs one last time. Others wrote letters they knew might never be mailed. Every man understood one possibility: by sunset he might be dead. Yet no one turned back. As darkness covered the English Channel, the greatest amphibious invasion in military history began. Long before sunrise, American paratroopers dropped behind German lines. Chaos followed immediately. Strong winds scattered entire airborne divisions. Some landed miles from their objectives. Others landed directly among German soldiers. Equipment containers disappeared into flooded fields. Radio units vanished. Commanders became separated from their companies. Instead of organized battalions, small groups formed naturally. 10 men here, 20 there, sometimes only 3 or 4. Without waiting for orders, they attacked anyway. Road junctions, bridges, communication lines. German headquarters suddenly found reports arriving from every direction. Paratroopers here, gunfire there, explosions everywhere. No one knew where the main attack would come. German commanders struggled to understand what was happening. This confusion became one of the invasion's greatest advantages. Then came dawn. The sea revealed something almost impossible to comprehend. The horizon disappeared beneath Allied ships, warships, destroyers, cruisers, landing craft stretching farther than the eye could see. German soldiers stared in disbelief. Many had expected an invasion. Few imagined one this enormous. Moments later, naval guns opened fire. The earth shook. Shells weighing hundreds of pounds slammed into German bunkers. Concrete exploded. Entire observation posts vanished beneath smoke. Then came the bombers. Wave after wave crossed overhead. Although many bombs missed because pilots feared hitting Allied troops, the psychological effect was enormous. German defenders realized immediately this invasion possessed resources unlike anything they had faced before. Yet the real battle had only begun. Among the 5 invasion beaches, Omaha Beach would become one of the bloodiest. American landing craft fought rough seas before reaching shore. Many drifted off course. Some struck underwater obstacles. Others sank before ramps and even lowered. Soldiers carrying nearly 80 pounds of equipment stepped into deep water. Many drowned immediately. Machine guns opened fire from cliffs overlooking the beach. Mortars exploded among crowded landing craft. Artillery shells shattered formations before they could organize. Within minutes, entire units ceased to exist. Officers fell. Radio operators disappeared. Medical personnel became casualties themselves. The carefully planned assault seemed close to collapse. German defenders believed they were winning. From their bunkers, the beach looked like complete disaster. Burning vehicles, floating bodies, destroyed landing craft. The invasion appeared to be failing, but then something happened. Individual American soldiers began making independent decisions. Without orders, without communication, without officers, small groups started crawling toward the bluffs. Engineers blasted gaps through obstacles. Rangers blasted gaps through obstacles. Rangers climbed impossible cliffs. Infantry followed wherever even the smallest opening appeared. No dramatic charge occurred. No single breakthrough changed the battle. Instead, hundreds of separate acts of courage slowly combined into one unstoppable advance. German machine gun crews destroyed one assault group, only to see another appear minutes later. Then another. Then another. The pressure never stopped. German veterans had experienced determined enemies before. They respected British professionalism. They feared Soviet endurance, but the Americans brought something different. Firepower unlike anything seen earlier in the war. Every German position discovered soon attracted artillery, naval guns, mortars, aircraft, tank destroyers, engineers. The response came quickly and continuously. One German officer later described fighting American forces as battling an entire industrial nation instead of individual soldiers. Every machine gun silenced, another appeared. Every destroyed tank, more arrived. Every damaged road, engineers repaired it. American logistics impressed German observers almost as much as American infantry. Trucks seemed endless. Fuel never stopped arriving. Ammunition remained abundant. Field hospitals expanded behind advancing troops. Replacement soldiers filled depleted units faster than Germans believed possible. Germany simply could not match that scale anymore. Yet technology alone did not explain what German soldiers witnessed. Again and again, American infantry returned after suffering terrible casualties. Entire platoons reorganized overnight. Battalions reduced to half strength attacked again the following morning. German commanders expected morale to collapse. Instead, the attacks intensified. Captured documents revealed remarkable organization. Supply chains functioned. Communications improved daily. Air support became increasingly precise. Every passing day strengthened Allied forces. Every passing day weakened Germany. This gradual shift became impossible to ignore. Still, Normandy itself became one of America's greatest enemies. Beyond the beaches lay the bocage. Ancient hedgerows divided farmland into hundreds of natural fortresses. Tall earth banks, dense roots, thick vegetation. Tanks struggled to cross them. Visibility shrank to only a few yards. Every field could hide machine guns, snipers, anti-tank weapons. German defenders understood this terrain perfectly. They transformed every hedgerow into another defensive line. For American soldiers, victory would not come quickly. Every 100 yards demanded blood. Every field became another battlefield. The easy breakthrough many expected never happened. Instead, Normandy became a brutal contest of endurance. Exactly the kind of battle German veterans believed favored them. At least, that's what they thought. As June turned into July, German soldiers began writing home. Letters described relentless American artillery, constant aircraft overhead, columns of trucks that seemed endless. Fresh troops replacing exhausted units. Many admitted something they would never have believed before D-Day. The Americans learned astonishingly fast. Every mistake made one week disappeared the next. New tactics emerged. Infantry coordinated better with tanks. Engineers created unexpected solutions. Artillery observers became increasingly effective. Air-ground communication improved constantly. German officers noticed they were fighting a rapidly evolving army, not an inexperienced one. Each passing battle made American units stronger. German units could only become weaker. Soon the real test of Normandy would begin. The beaches had been secured. Now the Allies had to break through the hedgerows, destroy Germany's defenses, and race across France. Standing in their way were some of Hitler's most experienced divisions. Panzer veterans, elite SS formations, battle-hardened infantry. They still believed they could stop the American advance. What happened next would convince many German survivors that the outcome of the war was no longer in doubt. For weeks after D-Day, the battle for Normandy became something few Allied planners had expected. There were no sweeping tank battles across open fields, no rapid advances like those seen in North Africa. Instead, every few hundred feet became another battlefield. The Norman countryside was divided by centuries-old hedgerows. Massive walls of earth covered with thick bushes and tangled roots stretched across the landscape. Some rose 10 feet high. Others hid entire German machine gun positions. Every field became a fortress. A single German squad could delay an entire American company for hours, sometimes for an entire day. German soldiers knew this terrain better than anyone. Many defensive positions couldn't even be seen until American troops were only yards away. The hedgerows blocked visibility. Artillery observers struggled to locate targets. Tank crews couldn't see over the thick embankments. Each time an American Sherman tank climbed a hedgerow, its vulnerable underside became exposed. German anti-tank gunners waited patiently. One shot, one explosion, another Sherman burned. It happened again, and again, and again. The German defenders believed they had finally found the battlefield that favored them. Veterans of the Eastern Front began comparing Normandy to the brutal fighting around Soviet villages, except this time, the enemy possessed overwhelming artillery. Every American battalion had access to firepower that many German commanders could only dream about. Radio operators could call artillery within minutes. Forward observers adjusted shell impacts with incredible precision. A hidden German position might survive the first barrage, rarely the second, almost never the third. The constant shelling exhausted German defenders. Even when casualties remained low, sleep became impossible. Every sound in the sky meant danger. Every engine could signal another artillery strike. Psychological exhaustion slowly spread through the German lines. The American army had another advantage. It learned quickly. The first attacks through the hedgerows had been costly. Infantry became separated from tanks. Communication failed. Units lost direction. Casualties mounted instead of repeating the same mistakes. American officers encouraged innovation. One of the most famous solutions came from an unlikely source. A battlefield sergeant noticed the steel obstacles the Germans had placed on the beaches. Large steel beams designed to stop landing craft. Engineers cut the heavy steel apart, then welded sharp teeth onto the front of Sherman tanks. Instead of climbing over hedgerows, the modified tanks smashed directly through them. The invention became known as the Rhino tank. Suddenly, the battlefield changed. German defenders who expected tanks to expose themselves over the embankments now watched American armor burst directly through the hedge in front of them. Their carefully prepared ambushes no longer worked. Once again, the Americans adapted faster than expected. German intelligence had spent years studying Allied armies. Many reports suggested American troops depended too heavily on equipment, that without tanks, without artillery, without air support, their infantry would struggle. Normandy proved the opposite. American rifle companies fought under conditions where artillery often couldn't help. Visibility disappeared. Fighting occurred at distances of only a few yards. Grenades, rifles, machine guns, bayonets. Small unit leadership became everything. Young lieutenants, experienced sergeants, even ordinary soldiers frequently made decisions that kept attacks moving forward after officers became casualties. German after-action reports increasingly mentioned the initiative displayed by American junior leaders. It wasn't what they had expected. Meanwhile, the skies above Normandy belonged almost entirely to the Allies. During daylight, German movement became incredibly dangerous. A single truck on an open road could attract fighter bombers within minutes. Columns of tanks traveled only at night. Fuel deliveries slowed. Ammunition shortages became common. Replacement troops often arrived exhausted after marching for miles to avoid aircraft. American pilots called it armed reconnaissance. German soldiers called it something else. They called it surviving. One panzer commander later described daylight movement as almost suicidal. Every crossroads, every bridge, every column of vehicles could suddenly erupt into explosions. The constant threat from above forced Germany to fight with one hand tied behind its back. Meanwhile, American supply trucks rolled forward almost continuously. Food, fuel, medical supplies, replacement parts, fresh ammunition. The logistical difference became impossible to ignore. Germany fought to preserve every vehicle. America simply delivered another. Still, the fighting remained brutal. The 29th Infantry Division, the 1st Infantry Division, the 4th Infantry Division, the 90th Infantry Division. Every American unit paid a terrible price advancing through Normandy. Entire companies disappeared. Veteran officers became casualties. Medics worked around the clock. Some rifle companies finished battles with fewer than half their original strength. Yet every morning, the advance continued. German soldiers couldn't understand how the Americans maintained such momentum despite their losses. The answer wasn't courage alone. It was organization. Behind every frontline soldier stood an enormous system capable of replacing weapons, vehicles, ammunition, and eventually, people. German divisions couldn't recover the same way. Every experienced soldier lost became almost impossible to replace. Many replacements received only limited training. Fuel shortages reduced maneuverability. Artillery ammunition became scarce. Communication increasingly broke down. Some divisions fought for weeks without adequate rest. Others defended impossible sectors with only fragments of their original strength. The imbalance widened every day. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel understood the danger better than almost anyone. He repeatedly warned Hitler that Allied air superiority made warfare nearly impossible. Without freedom of movement, German armored reserves could never launch the decisive counterattack needed to drive the Allies back into the sea. Rommel believed time favored the Americans. Hitler believed determination would change reality. The disagreement proved disastrous. Critical armored divisions remained under centralized control. Valuable hours disappeared. The invasion grew stronger. Germany's opportunity faded. As July progressed, American commanders prepared something entirely different. The slow hedgerow battles had achieved one critical objective. German forces became concentrated. Division after division crowded into defensive positions, exactly where Allied planners wanted them. The next phase would unleash one of the most devastating aerial bombardments of the Western Front. Its name? Operation Cobra. Before the attack, thousands of Allied aircraft gathered overhead. Heavy bombers, medium bombers, fighter bombers. The sky itself seemed to disappear beneath engines. German soldiers watched helplessly. There was little they could do. Fuel shortages had grounded much of the Luftwaffe. Anti-aircraft guns remained dangerously outnumbered. When the bombing began, entire sections of the battlefield vanished beneath smoke and dust. The explosions continued for what seemed like an eternity. Roads disappeared. Communication lines collapsed. Defensive positions crumbled. Even veteran German officers admitted they had never experienced destruction on such a scale. When the bombing finally stopped, American infantry and armored divisions attacked immediately. This time, the German line did something it rarely had throughout the Normandy Campaign. It broke, not everywhere, not instantly, but once the first gaps appeared, American armored columns poured through them. The carefully constructed defensive system that had held for weeks suddenly began collapsing. The war in Normandy entered an entirely new phase. German commanders realized they were no longer fighting merely to hold ground. They were fighting to survive. Captured German documents from the campaign reveal an important shift in attitude. Earlier reports often criticized American tactical skill. Later reports focused on American operational power. Their ability to combine artillery, armor, infantry, engineers, aircraft, and logistics into one coordinated system. German commanders increasingly recognized they weren't facing isolated units. They were facing an industrial military machine. operating at full capacity. Even successful German defenses often achieved little. Destroyed American vehicles returned. Damaged roads reopened. Lost positions were attacked again and again, until eventually they fell. One German veteran later summarized the experience with remarkable honesty. He said defeating individual American soldiers was possible. Defeating America's ability to replace them was not. That realization spread across Normandy during the summer of 1944. It marked the moment many German officers quietly accepted a painful truth. The Western Front could still inflict casualties. It could still delay the Allies. But winning had become something entirely different. The greatest collapse was still ahead. Within weeks, German armies would find themselves trapped inside a pocket from which thousands would never escape. The battle would destroy much of Germany's remaining strength in France, open the road to Paris, and convince countless German survivors that the war in Western Europe had been lost forever. Operation Cobra, the Falaise Pocket, and Germany's final realization, the German line had finally cracked. For nearly 7 weeks, Normandy had been a brutal contest of attrition. Every hedgerow, every village, every crossroads had been fiercely defended, but now Operation Cobra had changed everything. The narrow front where American forces attacked became a widening breach. Into that breach poured tanks, mechanized infantry, self-propelled artillery, and thousands of trucks carrying fuel, ammunition, engineers, and fresh troops. Unlike earlier battles, there was no time for Germany to establish another defensive line. The Americans moved too quickly. German commanders desperately attempted to restore order. Reserve units were rushed forward. Panzer divisions that had survived weeks of fighting were ordered into immediate counterattacks. The hope was simple: strike the Americans before they could exploit the breakthrough. But hope alone could not overcome reality. Many German tank crews entered battle with limited fuel. Some units lacked radio communication. Others had only a fraction of their authorized strength. The veteran formations that had once terrified Europe were shadows of themselves. On August 7, 1944, Germany launched what became known as the Mortain counteroffensive. Hitler believed one bold attack could cut through the American advance and reach the English Channel. If successful, the Allied armies would be divided. Supplies could be disrupted. Perhaps the invasion could still be contained. Instead, the attack revealed just how much the balance of power had shifted. American defenders held key positions. Despite repeated assaults. Forward observers called in devastating artillery. Fighter bombers attacked German columns throughout daylight. By the time the counteroffensive ended, Germany had spent precious armored reserves without achieving its objective. Many surviving officers privately admitted the operation had been doomed from the beginning. For American soldiers, momentum became their greatest weapon. The breakout transformed weeks of slow fighting into rapid advances. Across open country, Sherman tanks rolled through villages that had been occupied for years. French civilians emerged from hiding. Church bells rang again. American flags appeared beside French tricolors. For many soldiers, these moments reminded them why they had crossed the Atlantic. But celebration remained brief. The war was far from over. As German forces retreated eastward, a dangerous trap began to form. British and Canadian forces pushed from the north. American forces advanced from the south and west. The objective was clear: close the gap. Encircle the German 7th Army. Destroy it before it could escape. This battlefield would become known as the Falaise Pocket, one of the most devastating defeats Germany suffered on the Western Front. Inside the shrinking pocket, chaos replaced organization. Roads became packed with every type of military vehicle imaginable: tanks, half-tracks, horse-drawn wagons, ambulances, supply trucks, artillery pieces. Thousands of exhausted soldiers moved east under constant attack. The sky belonged entirely to Allied aircraft. Pilots reported columns stretching for miles. Bombs and rockets struck relentlessly. Vehicles exploded. Fuel trucks ignited. Smoke covered the countryside. Some roads became completely blocked by destroyed equipment. Others disappeared beneath abandoned vehicles whose engines had run dry. German survivors later described the retreat as a nightmare, not because they lacked courage, but because there seemed to be no safe place left. Move during daylight, aircraft attacked. Remain stationary, artillery found you, attempt to regroup. American armored patrols appeared, communication collapsed, orders often arrived too late. Many units simply fought their way east in whatever groups remained together. Yet despite overwhelming pressure, German resistance did not disappear overnight. Veteran officers organized rear guards. Small groups defended villages long enough for others to escape. Anti-tank teams ambushed advancing Shermans. Snipers delayed American infantry. Even in defeat, the professionalism of many German units remained evident. American veterans later acknowledged that the fighting during the retreat was still dangerous. Victory came at a heavy price. By the time the Falaise Pocket finally closed, the destruction was staggering. Tens of thousands of German soldiers had been killed, wounded, or captured. Huge quantities of equipment had been abandoned. Hundreds of tanks, thousands of vehicles, countless artillery pieces were lost forever. Perhaps even more damaging, Germany lost experienced officers and non-commissioned officers it could never replace. Equipment could sometimes be rebuilt. Combat experience could not. American intelligence teams examined abandoned German documents. Many reports painted the same picture. The greatest challenge was no longer individual American units. It was the combination of American industry, logistics, air superiority, artillery, engineering, and increasingly experienced combat leadership. German commanders recognized that every American success reinforced the next one. Captured fuel became unnecessary because Allied supplies continued arriving. Destroyed bridges slowed movement only briefly before engineers built replacements. Damaged tanks disappeared to repair depots while fresh vehicles rolled forward. The system never stopped. This realization extended beyond the battlefield. Even before Normandy, American factories had already outproduced Germany in nearly every major category. Aircraft, ships, trucks, landing craft, ammunition, military radios, construction equipment, medical supplies. The Normandy Campaign demonstrated what happened when that industrial strength was fully integrated into combat operations. Every rifleman at the front depended upon countless workers thousands of miles away. Steel workers, railroad crews, factory employees, shipbuilders, mechanics, farmers. The battlefield in France became the final destination of an enormous logistical network stretching across an entire ocean. Many German veterans later reflected on their impressions of American soldiers. Some admitted they had underestimated them before the invasion. Others expressed surprise at how quickly inexperienced troops became effective in combat. Several noted the confidence American soldiers gained once artillery, armor, and air support worked together. These observations varied from soldier to soldier, but a common theme appeared repeatedly. The U.S. Army improved rapidly as the campaign progressed. The force that landed on June 6th was not exactly the same force that broke out of Normandy in late July. Experience transformed it. The liberation of Paris soon followed. As Allied forces advanced toward the city, German occupation authorities recognized they could no longer hold the French capital. On August 25, 1944, Paris was liberated. Crowds filled the streets. Church bells rang throughout the city. French resistance fighters emerged openly. For millions around the world, the images symbolized hope after years of occupation. For Germany, they represented another irreversible defeat. Still, no one believed the war was over. The Siegfried Line waited ahead. The Hürtgen Forest, the Battle of the Bulge, the crossing of the Rhine. Months of bitter combat remained. American soldiers who survived Normandy would face some of the war's toughest battles before victory finally arrived. But Normandy had accomplished something historic. It established a permanent Allied foothold in Western Europe. From that moment forward, Germany fought a two-front ground war against overwhelming Allied strength. A strategic situation it could no longer escape. Historians today generally agree that no single factor determined the outcome in Normandy. American courage mattered. British and Canadian operations were essential. The sacrifices of Free French forces and resistance networks played an important role. Air superiority proved decisive. Logistics sustained the advance. Leadership evolved throughout the campaign. And above all, the Allied coalition combined these strengths into one coordinated effort. For German soldiers who experienced Normandy, the campaign challenged many assumptions they had held before D-Day. Some had expected inexperienced opponents. Instead, they encountered an army that adapted rapidly, coordinated immense resources, and maintained relentless operational pressure. That realization became one of the defining lessons of the Normandy Campaign. When historians study Normandy today, they often focus on strategy, maps, commanders, equipment, yet behind every statistic stood ordinary young men, many barely old enough to vote. Some had never traveled beyond their hometowns. Within weeks, they faced one of history's greatest military challenges. Thousands never returned home. Others carried the memories for the rest of their lives. Their experiences shaped not only the outcome of World War II, but the modern world that followed. Normandy was more than a battle. It was the beginning of the liberation of Western Europe. It demonstrated what determined soldiers, coordinated allies, and overwhelming industrial capacity could accomplish together. And it forever changed how German veterans viewed the American army. Not because American soldiers were invincible, but because they proved capable of learning, adapting, and sustaining a campaign on a scale Germany could no longer match. That, more than anything else, was the shock that echoed across the fields of Normandy in the summer of 1944. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary and want more historically researched stories from World War II, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which World War II story should we cover next? Until next time, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next documentary.